Coming to paperback and e-readers, the steam Season of the Witch Girl. The aspiring angel takes on a wicked teenage witch in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Esteem Season of the Witch Girl at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Historical Men in Crisis. One of my viewers wanted me to do another installment in the Historical Men in Crisis series. And for this installment, I'm going to be talking about Charles Adolphus Whitman Jr., Andrew Kissel, and Hunter Biden. Now, the first historical man in crisis I'm going to talk about in this Historical Men in Crisis video is Charles Adolphus Whitman Jr. Now, Charles Adolphus Whitman Jr. is the father of Charles Joseph Whitman, the man who participated in the University of Texas Tower shooting in 1966 that led to the death of 18 people, including Joseph Whitman, and wound up leading to the deaths of his wife and his mother. Now, Charles Adolphus Whitman Jr. was the father of Charles Joseph Whitman, and the way he raised his son led to him being a man in crisis. However, Charles Adolphus Whitman Jr. himself was a man in crisis due to the dysfunctional way he was raised and the way he was abandoned by his parents. Now, Charles Adolphus Whitman Jr. was abandoned by his family and left to be raised in an orphanage in Savannah, Georgia, and being raised in that orphanage basically did not lead to him growing up to become a healthy man. No, it led to him winding up on the road to being a man in crisis, and led to him being on the road to being a man in crisis because he did not get his emotional needs met inside of that orphanage, because inside of that orphanage he was raised under strict authoritarian people, and these strict authoritarian people thought they were raising him to be a disciplined man, but what they didn't know was, because this boy wasn't getting his emotional needs met, he was basically being raised to become one of these males who wasn't living in the real world, but was living in a rose-colored reality, and that rose-colored reality was distorting his perception of the real world. And instead of him seeing the real world and the real people in it, he began to see people not as people in an effort to make his world smooth. And in that effort to make his world smooth, he saw people as objects, and again saw people as objects that he could be able to get in to move himself from point A to point B, as he grew up to make himself into a self-made man who ran a plumbing business, which he had his wife working as a bookkeeper. And as he was running that business, he basically wanted to make sure that he had a very smooth world because of the trauma he experienced from being abandoned as a boy. Now, this trauma from being abandoned by his parents at an early age, I believe, started him on this road to looking to make his world smooth when he became an adult, because he didn't want that chaos to enter his world. And as he didn't want any chaos to enter his world, this is where he looked to go out here and keep everything very structured to the point where he didn't even have regard for his wife's own health and own autonomy as a person. He was a very abusive man who physically and emotionally abused his wife and his children, and did this because he wanted to make his world smooth, where he would have no conflicts, problems, or obstacles as related to his personal life, and not have anything disrupt his life so that he would wind up with his life being derailed. This is what he wanted to do. He wanted to make sure that his life wouldn't be derailed the way his life was derailed by his father and his mother abandoning them. And this is where he wanted to be the strict authoritarian, because he wanted to make sure everything remained in place wanted to make sure everything remained in place as related to his family, and created a covert contract where he would provide for his family and strive for their betterment, but demanded that they would submit to him and strive to be perfect. And as they would strive to be perfect, what was really sad was that Charles Adolphus Whitman Jr. didn't see how he was basically making life really bad, because he was abusing his family and abusing his wife. And again, as Charles Joseph Whitman was growing up in that home, and the wife was growing up in that home, they were basically, again, looking to try to fit into that world, not looking to go out here and do anything that would lead to a mistake, because in the eyes of Charles Adolphus Whitman, everything had to be perfect. Unfortunately, as everything was perfect, things were basically falling apart on the inside, because as he was looking to make a smooth world on the outside, he was basically one of these males who was simmering and boiling in anger, that he took out on his children, to make his world smooth. And again, as he was looking to make his world smooth, he was detached from the people in his life. And as he was detached from the people in his life, he couldn't see how his quest to make his children perfect was basically doing damage to his children, like his son, Joseph Whitman, because Charles Joseph Whitman was basically, he was a very intelligent child, but he was a ticking time bomb. Because like his father, he was simmering and boiling in anger, because he didn't have a sense of being able to be free to be himself like his father did. His father basically, again, wanted to fit himself in a place where he could make things perfect, but the thing, it wasn't perfect for him. He was in a situation where he was beating up his children, beating up his wife, and even the family pets, because he wanted to make the world perfect. But as he was looking to make the world perfect, he was participating in dysfunctional beta male behavior, because with beta males, they look to go out here and again, look to deal with their issues and deal with conflict. No, they don't deal with it constructively. They just suppress their feelings and eventually lash out at people when they make mistakes. And they lash out at people as they make mistakes. And sadly, as they go out here and look to make things perfect, ironically, they make it very worse. Because in the case of Charles Adolphus Whitman Jr., he basically created a situation where he created an intergenerational man in crisis, because instead of his children growing up to become successful sons, what happened in the case of Charles Adolphus Whitman Jr. is that he wound up with 3 of his children dying, one of them winding up dying as a result of AIDS, 2 dying violently as related to violent deaths. I mean, first was the infamous death of his son in 1966 when he participated in the University of Texas Tower shooting, and another son wound up dead as a result of an incident that I think took place where he wound up getting killed. And the whole thing is that the father, because he didn't want to deal with these issues, basically suppressed all of this, because this is what beta males do. They deny problems. They deny problems about their children because they want their smooth world. And again, want their smooth world and don't want to deal with the reality. Don't want to deal with the reality as related to the dysfunction that they're making with their children. I mean, with Charles Joseph Whitman, he participated in the University of Texas Tower shooting. His other son, John, wound up dead at the age of 24 at a bar in 1973, and a third son died of AIDS and AIDS complications in California. And all of those boys basically were the fruit of very dysfunctional and abusive parenting from a father who basically came from a father who was a man in crisis, who created intergenerational men in crisis and created a situation where all of these boys did not grow up to become healthy men, but sadly grow up to become men in crisis. And what was really sad is that Charles Whitman's father tries to suppress the memories of the tragedy that he wound up creating, a tragedy he wound up creating by raising boys not to become men, but winding up becoming men in crisis. Now, the second person I'm going to be talking about in this Historical Men in Crisis series video is Andrew Kissel. Now, Andrew Kissel was a real estate developer who was found stabbed to death inside of his Greenwich, Connecticut estate in 2006 and was found dead as a result of alleged possible shady dealings that he participated in with real estate. Now, Andrew Kissel and his brother, Robert, were basically men in crisis due to the dysfunctional way that they were raised, and these two beta males basically were raised to not really see people as people because of the way that they were raised, and because they saw objects as having more value than people. This is what motivated both of them to get involved with predatory people and look to go out here and maintain a lavish lifestyle that was beyond their means. Now, Andrew Kissel's brother wound up dead at the hands of his wife in 2003, and as she wound up dead at the hands of his wife in 2003, when she drugged him with a strawberry milkshake and then bludgeoned him to death, this is where Andrew Kissel's had wound up having to take the custody of his brother's children. And as he looked to take the custody of his brother's children, this is where Andrew Kissel was revealed to be one of these beta males, a beta male who was living a double life, where on the outside he was presenting himself as this really rich man who had great success. However, he was living in a secret world, and as he was living in a secret world where he felt he could have his natural masculinity and natural sexuality, he basically was out here buying lots of expensive items to be attachments in an effort to try to impress others in a covert contract. And as he looked to impress others in that covert contract, he was buying lots of expensive items and looking to maintain what he believed to be a rich person's lifestyle based on what he saw in Madison Avenue and Hollywood. This is what he was looking to do, looking to maintain this lifestyle, and was looking to do anything as related to unethical means to maintain that lifestyle, and looking to maintain that lifestyle even as he was a teenager. Again, his father was a wealthy entrepreneur, and again, he had his own Jeep and sports car, and the first efforts that he did was looking to impress a girlfriend by buying her a car on a whim, and then went into real estate. And as he went into real estate, he married Haley Wolf and started a company called Handrock based on the names of him and his wife. And as he was out here, he basically was out here. He was a member of a treasurer for a co-op, and as he was the treasurer of this co-op, he was looking to go out here and maintain his lavish lifestyle by going out here and allegedly embezzling money from the co-op's board, and again embezzling money that was supposed to be for expenses. And eventually the partners caught up to him in 2003, the same year that his brother wound up losing his life, and found out he had been allegedly making fake companies to pay for work on the building and then keeping the money for himself, and then also opened up a line of credit of $2 million, and basically again was stealing this money to maintain his lavish lifestyle and buy these attachments and maintain this false image of himself. That's what Andrew Kissel was looking to do as related to that money. And he basically, as he was doing this, he eventually got caught and agreed to a quiet settlement to keep his world smooth of $4.7 million that he said he would go out here and pay them back if they did not press charges for the embezzlement. But eventually, even though the co-op didn't press charges, eventually Andrew was still charged with grand larceny and more from the money he was taking. And as he was charged with this whole case, again, this was just weeks after Robert Kissel, his brother, was murdered by his wife, Nancy. And after this, he basically was, after settling that issue, he went out here and then found more success as related to businesses. But again, his spending got him in trouble, and got him in trouble because he basically, as he was out here addicted to going out here and maintaining this false lifestyle of being rich, he basically was spending more than he was making, and eventually this led to him having issues where he looked to escape through a cocaine addiction that basically led to him, again, exacerbating his problems because his marriage was suffering because of the fiscal issues he was having, and those fiscal issues eventually led to him and his wife having issues. And as she thought he was having an affair with another woman, but he was really investing in another business that was a Ponzi scheme. And again, eventually, after this was revealed, this is where Andrew Kissel was dealing with being arrested for fraud charges as related to the co-op. The same co-op basically, again, led to him winding up with being charged as related to these cases. Again, a federal case where he basically made a plea deal in 2006 to deal with the whole thing. He wound up selling all of his attachments to get out from under the whole situation. But on April 1st, as movers came in to empty the home that he had with his wife, Haley, what happened was they found the body of Andrew Kissel, and they found him dead, tied up with his t-shirt pulled over his head and knife wounds in his back in the basement. And the basement was covered in blood. And sadly, this is where Andrew Kissel wound up reaping what he sowed, greater than what he sowed, as related to his shady financial dealings, his drug habit, and all of his dirty business dealings. He wound up reaping what he sowed because he was a guy who did not see people as people, and again saw people as objects, and again looked to gain the favor and approval of people through covert contracts, and looked to gain the favor and approval of people through covert contracts. But sadly, those covert contracts basically led to a situation where Andrew Kissel wound up basically winding up in a bad situation where he wound up running into a situation with his gopher, Carlos Trujillo, a guy who basically was, again, his assistant. And again, this is where Carlos Trujillo basically was seen as a person of interest as related to the death of Andrew Kissel. And this is where he was a suspect in the case as related to things. Again, this is where they say that police are saying that, again, when it came down to these guys, they gained entry to Andrew Kissel's home to bring him cocaine. And as they were in this situation, he was bringing him drugs. And again, this is where they possibly say that this is where Andrew Kissel possibly didn't have the money for the drugs. And this is possibly what led to the, again, situation that led to him losing his life. Now, this is what they are saying as related to this whole situation that led to the convictions of Trujillo and another accomplice as related to things. Again, Andrew Kissel, basically like beta males, went out here and surrounded himself with shady people. And as he surrounded himself with shady people, he basically was preyed on by those predators because he wanted to go out here and, like many simps that I talk about in my book, Stop Simping, Why Men Don't Need Finance to Get Romance, hope to go out here and present an image of being rich to impress people. But he didn't understand that the people he was trying to impress in that secret world were predators and looking to go out here and look to prey on him. And again, look to prey on him because he didn't have the confidence to be a man, to stand up and be a man on his own. No, he was a man who was out here looking to get attention and approval of others. And as he was looking to get the attention and approval of others, sadly, what happened with Andrew Kissel is instead of him being a man, he wound up leaving this world a man in crisis. Yes, he lived the high life for a second, but wound up leaving in an ignominious fashion where his smooth world made everything rough for his children, made everything rough for him and the children he was caring for, where they aren't going to be cared for because they basically are on the road to becoming the next generation of men and women in crisis because they don't have a family the same way that these guys didn't have a family to teach them about male life skills or male survival skills. Now, the third and final person I'm going to be talking about in this historical men in crisis video is Hunter Biden. Now, Hunter Biden is the son of former President Joe Biden and his first wife, Nelia Biden. And Hunter Biden wound up on the road to becoming a man in crisis when he was very young. And Hunter Biden and his mother and sister Naomi were in an automobile accident on December 18th of 1972. Now, this accident basically wound up taking the life of Hunter Biden's mother, Nelia, and his sister, Naomi, and while Hunter and his brother, Bo, were seriously injured, they did survive. Unfortunately, when it came down to Hunter, he suffered a fractured skull and severe traumatic brain injuries, and those traumatic brain injuries could be the foundation of Hunter winding up being on the road to being a man in crisis. This and the great tragedy of losing his sister and his mother, and losing a mother for a boy is something that can be extremely traumatic because boys form bonds with their mothers, and those bonds basically can be exacerbated by survivor's guilt. And that survivor's guilt could possibly be the foundation for Hunter Biden being a man in crisis. Now, Hunter and Bo later encouraged their father Joe to marry again, and this is where Joe Biden married Jill Jacob Stevenson, and she became his stepmother and wound up with a half-sister, Ashley, who was born in 1981. Unfortunately, when it came down to Hunter Biden basically, even though he came from a very wealthy family with a father who was a U.S. politician, he basically was having issues as related to life and having issues as related to the traumas of learning that his mother and sister passed away, and dealing with those traumas, he basically could not cope with it at all, and this is where he wound up looking to escape through addiction. And as he looked to escape through addiction, he basically wound up on a road to a pattern of behavior I go in depth on in my book, The Man Crisis, called Addiction and the Man Crisis. And as he was looking to escape through drug use, this is what led to Hunter Biden basically having a lifelong issue with drug addiction, that has become a vicious cycle. Now, he went to some of the top schools as he was dealing with this addiction, such as Archmere Academy, got a degree from Georgetown University, and was basically put on a road to success as related to life, but sadly could not maintain that success. No, he couldn't maintain that success, even though he went out here and wound up again doing different things like becoming a Jesuit volunteer and attending the Georgetown University Law Center and then going to Yale Law School and becoming a lawyer. He could not maintain any of that success as related to his education, and use those connections to build on his father's success in politics. No, because of his issues with addiction, he had a hard time being able to again maintain his whole life as related to his career. Even though he had been given multiple different jobs, he wasn't able to maintain any of that success, basically because of the addictions that he had, and those addictions basically led to him not being able to deal with responsibility or take responsibility as a man like he did when he married Kathleen Buell, who he married in 1993. Eventually, she wound up divorcing him, and he wound up marrying another woman, Melissa Cohen. Now, he has 5 children, and again, as he's had 5 children, he basically hasn't been able to be a father to any of those children, and hasn't been able to provide for them because he can't take care of himself, can't take care of himself because he's so caught up in his addiction. And as he's been caught up in his addiction, he's been caught up in lots of different scandals as related to things like alleged tax evasion, money laundering, and dealings with foreign countries, and has still been dealing with a lot of different issues, such as the infamous, again, issue as related to purchasing a gun, even though he's not legally allowed to, and has been dealing with indictments from tax evasion and different issues, and is also known for being a part of the infamous Hunter Biden laptop controversy as related to looking to suppress several stories and evidence of disinformation with Russia. Again, Hunter Biden has been around a bunch of circles of scandals, and even though he was in those scandals, Joe Biden used his white privilege to try to keep his son out of trouble and hope to get him on track. But the thing that was keeping him off track is that he has not really dealt with any of this trauma from the tragic death of his mother. Now, Joe Biden has gone out here and given his son lots of different jobs and used his influence to give him lots of different jobs that many people like myself would have loved to have. But Hunter Biden basically winds up messing it up because, again, he has issues with addiction and issues with reality. I mean, he had a chance at being a part of the U.S. Navy Reserve, but wound up getting discharged because he wound up smoking a cigarette that he says was, again, had cocaine in it. But the whole thing is that's really a lie in and of itself. This man, again, never really knew how to deal with life because he never got male life skills or male survival skills due to the dysfunctional home that he was in, with him not ever being able to deal with having to have to deal with that trauma from losing his mother. That trauma from losing his mother and his sister, basically, again, I believe was compounded by survivor's guilt. And that survivor's guilt basically led Hunter Biden to being on the road to being a man who never could achieve the success of his father and basically could not achieve anything at all in life. Even though he was given everything, he could not maintain any sort of success. I mean, things that were disturbing. Again, he married Kathleen Buell, and then they wound up separating. Then he had a relationship with his brother's widow because he basically still was hurting about his brother. And again, Hunter Biden has a lot of serious issues as related to things, and at this point is like a Pookie, can't even pay his child support for his children, can't even take care of his family because he never learned how to take care of himself as a man, and is a man in crisis, caught up in addiction, and has been dealing with addiction ever since he was very young, and has been, again, to a point where he basically was in this vicious cycle where he was, again, going into rehab and coming back out, fueled by his father. His father would go out here and, again, help him get in these programs. But the whole thing is, Hunter Biden basically, again, even though he got lots of jobs and made millions of dollars, has nothing at this point. Nothing at this point because he smoked it all up, similar to the character of Samuel L. Jackson played in Jungle Fever. He basically has smoked up his entire life. And basically what's happened with Hunter Biden is that he's a textbook example of what happens with a man who winds up on the road to being a man in crisis and is not able to ever look to turn it completely around, and can't turn it around because he's enabled by his father and his father's white privilege. And since he's enabled by his father and his white privilege, he has no incentive to go out here and turn his life around, and has no incentive to turn his life around because his father keeps enabling him, and that keeps him from hitting rock bottom. That's the thing that basically has ruined Hunter Biden's life, is that he never is made to hit that rock bottom. And since he can't hit that rock bottom to turn his life around, Hunter Biden will possibly wind up a man in crisis until he sadly winds up passing away passing away as a result of his decades of addiction where he won't confront his problems and won't confront his problems because his family keeps making excuses for him instead of letting him learn how to be a man, to find a way out of the situation that led to him being a man in crisis. Now, if you want to learn to identify the behavior of males that leads to them winding up on the road to being a man in crisis and help them break out of that pattern, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Man Crisis at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. Now, this was a requested video, and if you want to request a video, you can send a donation for a minimum of $15 to the PayPal or the Cash App, and if I can find some information about that subject, I will make that video for you. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, A Thorn in My Side. The man who rules the world takes on an agent from the CIA from the Black Boule in this action-packed all-new John Haynes series adventure. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes' A Thorn in My Side at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.